All right. Welcome, my friends. How's it going? Once again, we are live all over the place. Armor of Truth Radio number 39. We are live at Twitter via Periscope. We're live on D-Live at Brad from Carolina. Live on Twitch at Brad from Carolina. And of course here on live on YouTube at Brad from Carolina. So 4 platforms live all at once. Adam H, Nick Bowles. There's Tracy. Hi Tracy. How's everybody doing out there? Good to see you. Welcome to the stream. Well, today we're going to talk about, we're going to get back into the issue. Yeah, for a minute. We're going to get back into current events for a little bit. There we go. All right, so, oh boy, it really takes a while for people to find this live stream when I go live. The way I'm having to do this, using a different source, but anyway, whatever. It's okay. The content is going to be on point, regardless. So if you're one of the few that are here right now, all right, welcome. We're going to have some fun. We're going to have some fun because we're going to poke holes in lots of things today, in lots of things. It may not be exactly what you're expecting. Taking a different approach. All right, so before we get started, let me mention that there are 4 ways to donate to this mission, to this channel, and to this mission. If you feel compelled to do so, those links are in the description. You can do it with PayPal if you like. One-time donation on PayPal. That's helpful. There's always the Patreon there for those who want to join up on the monthly pledge type of donation. And there's some exclusive content there on Patreon, and I'll be doing some live streams with the patrons, starting that pretty soon. And also now there is the option for those who don't like to utilize the YouTube Super Chats. Now, if the YouTube Super Chats are the easiest, most simple way for you to do your thing, to make donations, then that's fine. They're there and they're available. But the best way that I've found out is to follow the Streamlabs link that is in the description to make a live donation. And what I've discovered is that, at least for now, 100% of that donation makes it to me, makes it to my account without anyone pulling from it, because I pay a fee to Streamlabs for their services. And so that all of that donation gets directly to me, whereas YouTube takes a pretty big chunk. But whatever's easiest for you will be fine. All right, so support if you feel compelled to do so. It'll always be here, free for everyone to consume. So in that case, we definitely need your support. All right, so what are we talking about today? Well, we're talking about current events. Once again, we're talking about the virus, whatever's going on out there. Let's dive into it, because I want to introduce you today to a couple ideas that you learn when you take up a logic course or a course in argumentation about how to make arguments, or if you're going to be a debater. One of the first things you have to learn is something called the law of non-contradiction. The law of non-contradiction has to do with truth. In other words, the law of non-contradiction says that a thing cannot be itself and not itself at the same time. The light bulb cannot be on and off at the same time. The lady cannot be pregnant and non-pregnant at the same time. A cannot be A and non-A at the same time. So, and that's what contradiction means, opposition. And there's also the idea of the law of causality, what we would more commonly call cause and effect. that for every effect, there must be a cause. That is the nature of our experience here in reality. That is what we see happening around us. Things don't just pop into existence out of nothing. Not here in this contingent experience. And so when we think about these things, we think about the ideas of protests versus stadiums. For example, if it's not okay for people to gather at a baseball stadium to watch a baseball game, for people to gather at their church to worship God, then why is it okay for for protests and riots? In fact, why is that encouraged and the former is discouraged? There's a violation of the law of non-contradiction there. You're treating people differently based on what? Based on what? Science? Does the science say that protesters don't get sick? Did I miss that study? So there's a contradiction there. Not allowed to meet in churches. You're not allowed to meet up, go to baseball games, for example, if that's what you want to do. But if you want to gather up and protest and burn some things down, perhaps, you'll be safe. You'll be protected. You won't get sick. So there, a violation of the law of non-contradiction. Riots versus lockdowns. Things like that. These things don't make any logical sense whatsoever. And the story falls apart. So the question that I'm asking right now is this one. What is going on out here on YouTube, on the internet, among, let's just say, Christians, for example, who are schooled in apologetics, know how to debate, know how to make clear, cogent arguments? Why are we not applying that same skill, that same thoroughness and diligence to the current events that are happening around us? The idea of the thought that you must be an expert in order to understand whether or not there's a pandemic going on is ridiculous. If you're reasonable and you can perceive your environment correctly, then you can make an assessment on what is real and what is not real around you. So don't fall for the idea that, leave it up to the experts. We're listening to the scientists. Now listen, it's a good idea to listen to the scientists. It's a good idea to listen to multiple scientists, many. So if you hear a scientist on mainstream television telling you one thing, why don't you check it out with someone who's not in the mainstream? Who didn't appear in the mainstream, for example. Because what you find out is there are opinions, doctors, for example. Doctors that you might see on television, as opposed to doctors you might talk to who are not on television, producing or giving you two different accounts, two different stories about what is reality. That is a contradiction. And when we see that contradiction, that's where we know that truth has suffered. So why are not more of the great apologists, Christian apologists? Now, we know that our first duty is to share the gospel, is to lead people toward Christ so that the Holy Spirit can take over and get these people into the kingdom. That is first. And of course, secondly, is to make the case that Christianity is true and to defend it against objections. But what about these current events? What about this, whenever they decide to tell us where they're doing it again? They're doing it again now. They're shutting down churches, shutting down. The state is coming in and telling the church what it can and can't do. Telling churches what they can and can't do. Clearly, this could be because of something called the 501c3 tax status or designation. Maybe these People have to do that or they will lose their tax status, and thus the church will fail. So I guess the advice there then is don't go into business with the government if you're a church. But you have to pay those taxes and get the I got a visitor in the studio. Yeah. So you have to, as a church anyway, sorry about that. As a church, maybe it's better that as churches, as ministries, maybe it's better that we just pay our taxes if that's what keeps them off, or that we perhaps operate in such a way that we're not really perceived by the legal whatever. Let's not get into that right now. I don't want to have that debate right now. But the point is this. How have we gotten to the point where the state can come in and tell the churches that they cannot worship? How did we get to that point? All right, so I can get fired up on that issue. And I would love any well-known Christian apologists, pastors, any well-known or not. I don't care if you're well-known. I don't know why I said well-known, but maybe someone who's on YouTube who hears these things that I say would like to come on and help me understand where I'm wrong. Pastor or Dr. Michael Brown said a couple months ago that it was a poor Christian witness to stand up and say that, no, we ought to go to church. We ought to not allow the state to dictate to us whether or not we can worship together. And if we must, then we go underground. But we don't just stop. And so I've heard it said out there that it is a poor Christian witness to say what I just said out loud. I would like for these people, perhaps, if it's possible, maybe nobody knows this channel exists hardly, but if they would, I would be more than happy. It would be a blessing to have you come on here and explain to me why I'm wrong about that, because I can't figure out how I'm wrong about it. Anyway, all right, I went down that path. I warned myself not to go down that path, but I did it anyway. But let's talk about this a little bit. What are we talking about when we're talking about truth? All right. Views that self-destruct. In other words, views, statements, opinions, news, stories, whatever, that seem to violate this law of non-contradiction, where a thing cannot be A and non-A at the same time. Every statement is about something. Now, let me share with you what I'm looking at here. I'm using this from Gregory Kokel, Christian apologist, author, who's written an excellent book here years ago. It's 10 years old now. There's a 10-year anniversary version out there that's available to get now. Don't worry about this checkerboard floor up here. It's just don't worry about that. It's just not everybody is. Not everybody's a Freemason. But what this book does is it helps you to understand how to defend the existence of God, the resurrection of Jesus Christ, things like that, with how to answer objections to people that you might meet just in your the regular course of your life. Not being an apologist or being someone who's a debater, but this book will help you understand how to just answer objections that you'll find from family members or people you work with, or people you meet on the street, whatever. Every statement is about something. For example, the sentence, "Cats chase rats," is about cats. Sometimes statements include themselves in what they refer to. Like, for instance, the statement, "All English sentences are false," is about English sentences and including itself. In the last case, you can immediately see a problem. The statement has within it the seeds of its own destruction. If all English sentences are false, then the English sentence declaring it so must also be false. And if false, then it is easily and appropriately dismissed. 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 The idea that there's a brand new existential threat to humanity and it's wiping people out and we must shut it all down to prevent it from dismissed. Dismissed. It violates the law of non-contradiction. It is dismissed, in my opinion, of course, in my opinion. Worried this live stream might just disappear any minute now, folks. You might want to pay attention. They might pull this one live. When statements fail to meet their own criteria of validity, they are self-refuting. Even when they seem true at first glance, and many do, they still prove themselves false. The minute the words are uttered, they fail. Here are some obvious examples of such a thing. So a statement, for instance, like there is no truth. Is that true? A statement like there are no absolutes. Is that absolute? So you see where we're headed with this. A statement like this: no one can know any truth about religion. And how precisely did you come to know that truth about religion? So you see what we're doing here. These statements are made all the time, and they just seem to pass over the heads of most people. So that's what I'm interested in doing here today. It's just laying this out there so that when we hear these things stated, we're more equipped. We're more well equipped to understand whether or not someone is making logical sense or whether or not perhaps this is just some type of rhetoric intended to promote some kind of agenda. Another one of the quotes, statements might be something like, you can't know anything for sure. Are you sure about that? Talking about God is meaningless. But what does this statement about God actually mean? Another one of these statements might be, you can only know truth through experience. So what experience was it that taught you that truth? Never take anyone's advice on this issue or whatever issue, some particular issue. Never take anyone's advice on some particular issue. Should I take your advice on that issue? So you see, this is what Gregory Kokel calls the suicide tactic. When you can point out these things, you can show how the argument commits suicide itself. It's dead before it even gets started. This tactic works because of a rule of logic you're already familiar with. We've just talked about it. And it's called the law of non-contradiction. This law reflects the common sense notion that contradictory statements cannot both be true at the same time. All of these kinds of views, these suicidal views, either express or entail contradictions. They make two different claims that are at odds with each other. Two claims that are at odds with each other. For example, we have more cases than anyone in the world. Our cases are spiking. They're spiking. But what's happening with the death toll? Lowest it's been. So where is the truth then? Is the fear about the cases of something that seems to be pretty easily handled by most people? Or is it about the deaths? Because if you're talking about the deaths, hey, according to statistics alone, not whether or not they're true, but according just to the statistics alone, we're in good shape. We're in good shape with this thing. It's very much under control. The curve has been flattened. We're through it. But no, see, that narrative doesn't work. And it's a lot harder to lie about deaths because someone's either dead or they're not, right? That's, once again, that law of non-contradiction. You're either dead or you're not. There's no other option there. But when you're talking about cases, you can fudge cases all you want. If you've got 110 different tests that you're using to look for one thing, then you don't have a test at all. There's an old saying in football, when you have two quarterbacks, you don't have any quarterbacks. I would say it might apply here too. When you have 110 different tests for one thing, that actually means that you don't have any tests. You don't have anything that's reliable. And I'm sure you're all aware of all of the, it's talked about here a lot. Days of Noah channel has talked about it. Jesse Spots, of course. We've all talked about this stuff for months now. That the testing, listen, they're out there discovering viruses that or whatever you want to call them. There's questions about whether or not viruses are exactly as they're described. Not the point. We're just talking about contradiction here. Is whatever that's showing up positive on tests out there something that's new or something that was already there? You see, they're testing for something called the coronavirus. The thing that they say people die with is a syndrome, which is a constellation of symptoms called COVID-19. Should we automatically assume that this thing that causes a positive test result is the thing that causes this syndrome that people may or may not be dying from? Is that a leap? Do we get? Is there a real connection between the two that's been clearly shown, or are we caught up in scientism, pseudoscience? All suicidal views either express or entail contradictions. They make two different claims that are at odds with each other. Like we said before, A is the case and A is not the case. But the light is on and the light is off at the same time. That would be contradiction. Obvious contradictions are often funny when we see them because they have absurdities built into them. Here are a couple examples. I used to believe in reincarnation, but that was in a former life. I don't believe in reincarnation. I do believe in reincarnation. Here's a good one. Nobody goes to that place anymore. It's too crowded. It's crowded. It's not crowded. I wish I had an answer to that, but I'm tired of answering that question. I don't know the answer to that question. I do know the answer to that question. I never repeat a word. Never. I don't repeat a word. I just did repeat a word. This page is intentionally left blank. This page is blank. This page is not blank. Here's a good one. You're in rare form, as usual. Your performance is rare. Your performance is not rare. These terrorists have technology we don't even know about. We know things about things we don't know about. So you see, that's a little idea. Now, for instance, let me tell you what I saw on television just a little while ago. As I was passing by one. I think it was the Smithsonian Channel running their yearly or bi-year, how many ever times a year they do it, their episode on 9/11, where they have Richard Gage, I think that's his name, from Architects and Engineers for 9/11 Truth, where they bring him on there and he gives his analysis, his opinion of what happened, and then they immediately say, of course, Mr. Gage's hypothesis is extremely problematic. Well, of course. But anyway, the point is this. Where can we apply the law of non-contradiction to something like that? Well, for the whole hour, I didn't watch the whole thing, but I've seen it before. I've seen it probably several times before. They go into great detail discussing why or how these twin towers fell at terminal velocity, how they fell at the speed of, at free fall speed, and how could the steel have been weakened, and blah, blah, blah. But not a word ever about Building 7. Not a word. Why is that? Because Building 7 is a contradiction to the story they produce and promote about the Twin Towers. You see, a contradiction is there. Therefore, they just don't address it. They're dishonest. They don't address Building 7. Why? Because it is problematic for their argument. And the man, whoever whoever the lead investigator was at first on this thing, I think he was with the government 9/11 Commission. I think he was with anyway, I can't remember who it was, but whoever this person was who was investigating it made a comment that really stuck in my head. He said, listen, for me, this it was, how did he say it? He said, government involvement was never on the table for me regarding 9/11. Government involvement was never an option for me investigating this thing. Well, now, how would you like to hear that if one of your family members, one of your loved ones, or someone you knew, a good friend, had died in that building, and you hear this investigator saying, yeah, I'm not even interested in looking at government involvement. Why? Are you investigating this thing or not? Are you actually looking for the truth or not? Because if you're looking for the truth, you got to consider all the options. I happen to think it wasn't necessarily government involvement as much as it was corporations and nations working together. More on that some other time. So, contradictions. We see them all over the place. When an idea or objection violates the law of non-contradiction in a straightforward fashion, Greg Kokel calls it formal suicide. It's a formal fallacy. To recognize if a view has suicidal tendencies, first pay attention to the basic idea, premise, conviction, or claim. What is it they're trying to put forward? Try to identify it. Next, ask if the claim applies to itself. If so, is there a conflict? All right, so introducing the law of non-contradiction is, I want to do that today because it's kind of the first step when you start understanding how to debate or just discuss these issues with people. It's very helpful. And the law of causality, cause and effect, one of the greatest ways for arguing for the existence of God with people who don't believe in God or are atheists. But it goes much deeper than that when we talk about these issues regarding our current events right now. So let me get over here to that and let you guys see what I've got for you. I've got some articles that are going to I've got some John Rappoport stuff for you, but I'm going to start out with an article from Vox today. Here we go. Now, there's another article. We're going to run out of TV. That was one I was planning on using today too, but you save that one for later. Start out here with this article from Vox. COVID-19 cases are rising, but deaths are falling. What's going on? All right, so let's just cruise through this article. And they say right off the bat, there is something confounding, something confusing about the new U.S. coronavirus spikes. Cases are rising, but the country is seeing its lowest death count since the pandemic first exploded. That is the first piece of evidence where you could begin to make the case, or you could begin to research making the case, that what they're calling the cause and the effect, which is COVID-19, are not related. This is a piece of evidence that can be used to indicate that. So when people say, well, that's a crazy notion. How can you say that what people are testing positive for, what people are dying for, are not the same thing? Here, because of this correlation. Now, correlation is not causation, but we're making a case. We're not saying, hey, there it is, it's over, the case is over. We just put the pin in the board. Just put it in the board. There's a point. The numbers are genuinely strange to the naked eye. You get how this is written? Wow, these numbers sure do look strange to the naked eye, but I'm sure they make perfect sense to the trained eye, to the scientist. Now, of course, that is true in many cases. In many cases, that's true. When we're talking about complex data, That's not what we're talking about here. On July 3rd, the U.S. reported 56,000 new COVID cases, a record high. On the same day, 589 new deaths were reported, continuing a long and gradual decline. We haven't seen, look at this, we haven't seen numbers that low since the end of March. So what is the fear? What is the actual fear? Now, the case they're going to make here in the Vox article, I'm not going to read the whole thing. You're welcome to look. It's on Vox. It's not, what's the date? It's from July 6th, so it's not that long. Anyway, they're saying that we haven't seen numbers that low since the end of March. So we've got April and May and June, over 3 months, where there has been, according to death toll, no pandemic, no existential threat, nothing that requires anything like the response that we see happening and being called for again now, like in California, and it's the state I'm in now. People are talking about going back to phase 1, whatever the heck that means. It means lockdown. It means violation of constitutional rights. That's what it means. It means violation of God-given rights. Anyway, let's just follow the language of this article. When lay people observe those contradictory trends, they might naturally have a follow-up question. If death, yeah, you know why? Because generally, people are generally pretty rational because that's what's required for survival. Yeah, so people do have a follow-up question to that, and they're saying, if deaths are not increasing along with cases, then why can't we keep reopening? No, that's not the question, Vox. That's the question. That's how you like to frame the question. The question is this. If deaths are not increasing along with cases, then are the deaths associated with the cases? That's the question, my friends. Don't get caught up in this, well, why aren't we reopening? No. The case to be made is, the question to be asked is the positive test for whatever actually connected to the deaths that are being recorded and have been recorded? Are they connected? Or is that just some, is that perhaps an equivocation maybe that we've all been duped into making? An assumption that we've been duped into making. The lockdowns took an extraordinary toll of their own, after all, in money and mental health and some lives. If we could reopen the economy without the loss of life we saw in April and May, then why shouldn't we? Yeah, that would be a very good follow-up question, but it's not the first question. Remember, they won't ask the real question, because then they'd be forced to answer it. The real question is, if deaths are not increasing along with cases, then are cases and deaths actually correlated? It's a fair question to ask. This thing called COVID-19 is a collection of symptoms, a constellation of symptoms. It's symptoms. It's not a monolith. It's not a big boogeyman. People who die with this ailment, with this disease, with this syndrome, people who die with this collection of symptoms are dying from pneumonia, bacterial pneumonia, things like that. They're dying from the same things they always died from, which is not especially enlightening information to share, but it is important to keep in mind, because it's not like COVID-19 is not like, let's just say, cancer. I guess maybe it is. The point to be made here is, let's ask the right question. Are the cases correlated to the deaths? Is it the same thing? Let's see. How far do we need to go on this article? I'm not sure if we need. The sinking death rates reflect the state of the pandemic a month or more ago. So the case they're making here on Vox, because clearly Vox is a mainstream outlet for the official narrative. For people who think that they're woke, they go to Vox, but then they get this stuff. So They say in here, they're making the case that this SARS-CoV-2 is a very slow-moving pathogen until it's not. Say what? What did we just talk about? Law of non-contradiction. The novel coronavirus is a maddeningly, frustratingly slow-moving pathogen until it's not. So is it a slow-moving pathogen or is it not? It says here, the sinking death rates reflect the state of the pandemic a month or more ago, experts say, when the original hotspots had been contained and other states had only just begun to open up restaurants and other business. So we have a claim. The claim is that people going back about their businesses caused all of these cases to happen. Meanwhile, the death toll plummets. The law of causality. Cause and effect. What is the cause of the effect? It means it could still be another few weeks before we really start to see the consequences. Look at that. See the consequences in lives lost. So, of course, the idea here is that the assumption being made here is that the positive test actually is somehow correlated to what people are dying from. It's a fair question to ask. Are they really related? Does this positive test that people are getting or not getting or whatever, let's just assume that it's a legitimate test for now. Then we're still, assuming that everything that they're saying is true, it's still a valid question to ask. Is what people are testing positive for related to what people are dying from? And the case that Vox is making here is that the reason that deaths are low and cases are high is because now suddenly the virus is slow moving, but at other times it's not slow moving. Sometimes it takes 2 weeks to show up in you. Sometimes it can take overnight. Listen, it's all over the place. And the answer to that kind of a dilemma would be this. There were people, the people in these positions would say, it's just because we don't know enough about it yet. Really? Really? Because you seem to talk like you know a lot about it. It says here, more infected people means faster spread through our society. It's Kumi Smith, who studies infectious disease at the University of Minnesota. And the more this virus spreads, the more likely it is to eventually reach and infect someone who may die or be severely harmed by it. Sounds like regular life to me. Sounds like the same problem we had a year ago here in this world, in this fallen world, where illnesses exist. Nothing new under the sun, my friends. Same old stuff. This presents a communications challenge, sadly, as Smith put it. Please abstain from things you like. Please abstain from things you like to benefit others in ways that you may not be able to see or feel is not an easy message for people to accept after 3+ months in relative isolation. You might call it relative isolation. Others might call it house arrest. Violation of constitutional rights. But the question we have to ask is, always about these kind of things, is it true? Does it pass the test? I'll say it. So the Vox article, the point that they're making is we haven't seen the deaths from this recent outbreak. Now, let me make a point here. The assumption is that there is an outbreak, that a virus is spreading through the people. Without some kind of knowledge about how many people carried it 6 months ago or a year ago, then these numbers that they present to us today mean nothing. They're just going around counting people who may or may not always carry this. So let's go see what it is. that John Rappoport has to say about this and that. We haven't checked in with John in a while. I usually get in trouble when I share John's work here, but hey, whatever. I'm going for it. So he's got a little piece here called COVID. What was the plan all along? The plan was to sell a story about a new virus, a virus that researchers would believe they had discovered but didn't. The researchers are cultishly devoted to procedures of discovery that are scientifically useless and non-valid, as Rappoport has explained in many articles. He's got over 150 articles on the coronavirus on his site, nomorefakenews.com. So a few questions here. Why would elite players have run all of these pandemic exercises, drills, planning sessions, and tabletop simulations well in advance of the outbreak? And that's the point I'm trying to make. I'm trying to make the point that there is no outbreak. They just decided to start counting people. Doing testing with a test that's obviously not any good. When you can send a swab in it's never been probed on anyone, not even taken out of the package, I guess. I don't know how this happened, but I read that this has been in the news lately. These test modules were sent off to be evaluated, and some of these came back showing positive tests when these swabs, they had never been probed. They were just clean. These things were clean. They had not been used on anyone, and they showed. So, of course, that could also be used in the other way by the establishment to say, but look how prevalent it is. It's everywhere. It's on everything. Yeah, but see, come on. Remember, folks, just go outside, walk around, and look at the real world. Look at the trees. Look at the clouds. Talk to people. Sky is not falling. Not yet, anyway. And not because of this. Why would a few of these, why would elite players have run all these pandemic exercises well in advance of the outbreak so that anyone with a computer could discover them in hours? That's a very good question. Event 201 is right out there on YouTube. You can watch it anytime you want to. It's a 3-hour seminar type tabletop exercise where they talk about how to manage the very pandemic that we're in right now. Why would a few of these exercises have openly named a coronavirus as the cause of the upcoming pandemic? Very good question. Why is this stuff so easy for us to find? Right? Why is it so easy for us to find all of these breadcrumbs? The plan all along was to dupe people into believing that a real virus was spreading across the globe. The tabletop exercises, the drills, the seminars, the announcement of the discovery of a new virus, all of these tactics were part and parcel of convincing people that the story of a new virus was real. And if you doubt that so many researchers, planners, public health officials could be in on the conspiracy, well, you're absolutely right. That's a very good question. People ask us all the time, well, wouldn't it require everyone to be in on it and everyone to be lying together? No, because you've got true believers. You've got people who are true believers of the system that they're a part of. They don't question it. Just like the man I mentioned a minute ago who was leading the investigation on 9/11, on the Twin Towers. And he said very plainly, hey, government involvement was never on the table for me. Why not? Are you an objective investigator or are you not an objective investigator? No need for conscious knowledge. 99.99% of the players are already true believers in the virus. You've got, let's say, a dozen pre-pandemic tabletop exercises. A dozen. Yeah, Event 201 was not the only exercise that happened before this. There are 300 people sitting at tables, and they believe they're talking about a real deadly virus because by prior medical training and propaganda, they were taught to be true believers. Like the little video I made a couple months ago about more dangerous than any virus, where it's just a collection. I'm not speaking in it at all. It's just a collection of World Health Organization experts and scientists sitting around the table talking to one another about why their vaccines harm people and what they're going to have to do about that. The contradiction is, wait a minute, the vaccines are harming people. Why don't we stop giving them? But see, that's never the thought process. We have to give the vaccine. Even if it hurts people, we have to give it to them. Even if it kills people, we have to give it to them. Because by prior medical training and propaganda, they were taught to be true believers. That's why it's not necessary to convince everyone. Do you think the people in the news, the talking heads on the news, some people say, well, they're just agents, they're paid, they'll say whatever they're paid to say. Yeah, in many cases, that's probably true. But in most cases, they're probably just true believers. They probably just believe everything that they're told they should believe. And at those exercises, there was one man sitting inconspicuously at a table or leaning quietly against a wall, observing who knew the truth. He was there to make sure the believers never wavered. If someone wants to make a movie about reality, there it is. Here John's given another little thing to think about here. He says a variation. Let's say 20 CIA people are sitting at a table planning a covert infiltration of and a revolution in a foreign country, which is the enemy. And everyone at the table believes that foreign country is the enemy, except for one man. He knows the CIA has already created, through propaganda, a false story about that country being the enemy. This has been the playbook over the last 30 years or so in foreign policy and wars that the U.S. has been involved in, or the West has been involved in together. There are dozens of variations on this theme, which is the true believers and then the operator who knows the truth. Once again, this is, this idea of the pyramid. Someone take a picture of that right quick so you can get me making this symbol. But the pyramid, where very few at the top have the knowledge, and everyone else below them is working to get to the top of the pyramid, but they don't know. They don't know. They don't have the knowledge yet. Therefore, they'll do whatever the people at the top tell them to do because they want to be at the top. Meanwhile, the people at the top want to keep the people at the bottom in the bottom. There are dozens of variations on this thing. Another example, let's talk about a patriot, quote unquote patriot. CEO with deep pockets commits his workers and resources to building up weapons for the war effort. But at the same time, he is secretly selling armaments to the enemy. Happens all the time. He's playing a bigger game. 99% of everyone else believes the war is being fought honestly. How about this one? A phony televangelist is preaching to huge crowds and raking in donations. Only a few trusted associates know the whole operation is a con. The crowd, the people in the crowd, they're the true believers. You see how that works? Think about that at one of these big Catherine Kuhlman or Benny Hinn gatherings where 100,000 people come to see him in Africa, where everyone on the stage knows they're running a con job. But 100,000 people that came to watch are all true believers in Benny Hinn, in a lie. That is how things like this that we're experiencing right now spread so rapidly. And I don't mean virus. I mean the virus of confusion. Behind the hustle is a political hierarchy. That means only careful chosen scientists are allowed to stand next to the president. Aha. Political hierarchy. Only carefully chosen scientists are allowed to stand next to the president on television. That, my friends, is what we mean by technocracy. Carefully chosen scientists are the ones who actually are making decisions, are setting the standard. That means that only carefully chosen scientists are allowed to stand next to the president on television and lie through their teeth to the public. Have you seen the videos of Tony Fauci? Whenever the camera turns off, the mask comes off. Whenever it's on, though, buddy, he's got it. He's really covered up. He even picks his nose through his mask. But when the camera turns off, the mask comes off. Isn't that interesting? You can find that out there. Just Twitter or YouTube. Might be on YouTube. I don't know. I'll try to share it with you sometime if I can pull it back up. The COVID plan all along involved lockdowns and economic devastation. That was and is the short-term goal. The story about a virus is the means to arriving at an end or the fulfillment of this goal. And we've made that case over and over that it is, at least in my opinion, and many of those I know and work with, that this is the new face of Agenda 21. The agenda for the 21st century. Sustainable development. Stack them and pack them. Tag them and trace them. Get everybody into the smart grid system. And keep people off of the land. Keep people out of the country. It's possible the next phase of the plan will involve an excuse to assign energy use quotas and limits to nations. Ordinarily, this would be sold via a story about climate change. After the virus hoax and lockdowns, some fairy tale about needing reallocation of energy in order to reopen national economies with justice might be the ticket. Don't look for logic here. The planners use fake logic, just as they use fake viruses. Globalist technocrats yearn for energy quotas. They want to monitor and control the ongoing energy use of every human. That, my friends, that is the essence of the agenda for the 21st century right there. Monitor and control the ongoing energy use of every human. And we're talking about energy use. We don't only mean the power grid, your energy, your ability to move around. It's part of their vision for re-engineering society to resemble a machine. Technocracy. There it is. Stay tuned, stay resistant. Revenge of the Nerds wasn't just a movie. It's a good point. Revenge of the Nerds. It's a very good point. Revenge of the Nerds. We're living right now in the Revenge of the Nerds. Now, let's see. John's investigation into the deaths. We'll do the cult of COVID first. All right. So, John Rappoport's investigation into the cult of COVID. How did it go? After he published several recent articles, over 150 articles on the coronavirus, an issue was raised. A question was asked. And he says here, I'll use it as an introduction to this piece. Rappoport says that he stated that a new COVID virus was never properly discovered. All right, so that means we need to read this article first. This is where he actually says this. My investigation of the so-called COVID deaths. So there you go. He's written over 150 articles on the COVID fraud. For every major assertion that John Rappoport makes in the following overview, he's written at least one article for it. So to sum up, deaths labeled COVID have nothing to do with the purported virus. There you go. There's the claim that I was making earlier. Or the question, just a question I was asking. Not a claim, it's just a question. And it deserves to be appropriately answered. Does whatever people are testing positive with have any relation whatsoever to what people are being reported as dying from? Well, have we made assumptions? I think we've made many assumptions. And we've locked down our economies and caused people great deal of pain and suffering without asking the right questions before it happened. The purported virus has never been discovered. How about that claim? This purported virus has never been discovered. A claim of discovery was made, but proper scientific procedures were never carried out. Which leaves the question, why are all these people dying? Or are all these people dying? Are the deaths all stemming from the same cause? No. Of course, they are not. We know that. We know the COVID-19. Let's just say that's all. Everything is true that's been said. Okay, well, even from the way that they report it, no, they don't die of one thing. They die of pneumonia or cancer. People dying with cancer even. Oh, there's Rosie Clower with a super chat. Thank you, my friend. I appreciate that. I appreciate your help and your support a lot. Rosie Clower, thanks for that. So are all deaths stemming from the same cause? They cannot be shown to be. All we know that there are people that are dying from some cause who are then given or maybe previously had a positive test of something that they're calling coronavirus. We've made a lot of assumptions here, my friends. We've allowed assumptions to lead us directly into the belly of the beast, the New World Order. So let's get it. He says here, an overview. A huge percentage of people dying have traditional diseases, flu-like illness, pneumonia, other lung infections. And when we see people dying in nursing homes, are we supposed to be shocked and surprised by that? Do we understand the population that lives in nursing homes? They're old people. They're at the end of their lives. Death happens all the time at the nursing home. So the question would be, are there more deaths than usual at nursing homes? And if so, what's the cause? We don't automatically need to assume, wow, the coronavirus is killing all these people in nursing homes. Maybe we should look a little deeper. Maybe we should use our abilities of reason, logic, evidence, and argumentation, being able to make arguments. Maybe we should use the skills we have and apply it to the world around us. For example, about 300,000 people a year in China die from pneumonia. It's quite easy to call some of those deaths COVID. A large number of people in Italy die every year from flu-like illness. The same relabeling occurs there. In Chinese cities, in the north of Italy and Spain, there is very heavy air pollution. This pollution causes severe lung conditions and exacerbates already existing lung problems. Some of the consequent deaths are now called COVID. All you have to have is that positive test result. Actually, you don't even have to have that. Our evidence clearly over the past few months, you don't even have to have a positive test result. If you just have certain symptoms, they'll check the box. And we know that there's a financial incentive to do that. There are conflicts of interest all over this thing. A financial interest to have a positive diagnosis of coronavirus. And then another financial interest in putting someone on a ventilator. $13,000 is what it's reported that for getting a diagnosis of COVID-19. And $39,000 is what is coming from the insurance companies when you have to vent someone who's a COVID-19 patient. So, conflicts of interest. We are justified in. So, as Rappoport has stated in previous articles, COVID is old, people. In New York, for example, those 65 and older account for 73, almost 74% of the deaths in the city. These people are actually dying prematurely of previous serious health conditions, plus long-term treatment with toxic drugs. See, we never hear that. How many of these? Let me just keep going. Plus long-term treatment with toxic drugs, plus the terror of a COVID diagnosis, plus isolation from family and friends. Many of these people are dying in nursing homes. No new virus is required. What if one day we just started reporting in the news all the deaths that are happening all around in the world? Just no new deaths are happening. People are just dying at the same rate. What if the news one day just decided to start reporting all the deaths that are occurring? Wow, it would seem like that the world, it would seem like that, like something new is killing people. But no, they just decided to start talking about it. Take that picture, and it will generally describe what is happening all over the world. COVID is old, people. In Canada, for example, 81% of all so-called COVID deaths occur in nursing homes. convenient. One other factor in New York. The current hospital treatment, breathing ventilators, and sedation kills 97.2% of those patients over the age of 66 who are subjected to it. Pay attention to that stat right there, folks. In New York, this comes out of New York, the current hospital treatment, which is breathing ventilators and sedation, kills 97.2% of those patients over the age of 66 who are subjected to it. And we have a financial incentive to put those people on ventilators. Conflict of interest. What about this relabeling? How is it done? In hospitals, doctors simply write COVID-19 on patient files. That simple, huh? After patients die, their charts can be tagged COVID. In general, there are 3 types of diagnosis. No test at all, just the observation of general flu-like symptoms, or a PCR test, or an antibody test. Both tests spit out COVID results in a significant percentage of cases. The result has nothing to do with the detection of a unique COVID virus. The result is a function of the tests. Are the tests reflecting reality? Do the tests pass the law of non-contradiction? What about new conditions? Are any people dying as a result of non-traditional factors? In any so-called pandemic, this is possible. In the north of Italy, there were several vaccination campaigns just prior to the announcement of COVID. In New York, as Rappoport pointed out earlier, the ventilator treatment is killing patients. Then there is the whole issue of 5G technology rollouts. To delve into that subject, Rappoport suggests exploring the work of Arthur Furstenberg, author of The Invisible Rainbow. There you go, folks. There's a tip for you. If you're interested in the issue of 5G technology rollouts, here you go. Arthur Furstenberg, author of The Invisible Rainbow. But here is the takeaway from all of this right now. Do not assume that one cause is the explanation for all, so-called, for all of these deaths that we're being told are part of this pandemic. This is a common deep error. But you might say something like, well, if it isn't the virus, then what is it? There is no it. There's only a psychological disposition to search for an it. Look for multiple causes. There are always outlier cases, unexplained deaths. Some people are quick to jump on these cases and claim they prove the virus is real and is a killer on the loose. Nothing could be further from the truth. Young and healthy, suddenly drop dead. See, it must be the virus. No, it doesn't have to be the virus. Unexplained cases, especially when a viral cause is arbitrarily brought on board, need to be examined very closely, but they rarely are. Why are we not asking more questions? And by we, I mean the people who we elected to go do our bidding for us locally, regionally, state level, federal level. Why do they not ask questions like this? Because it's not allowed. The establishment doesn't allow it, because the point to be made here is because you can't talk about this generally the way we're talking about it here, because it's not received well. There's more I could say now and want to say, but on this platform, if I intend to stay here on this platform and be able to share the gospel and do this ministry, I can't go down those alleys. I'll lose the channel. That's how these things are controlled. It doesn't have to be the virus. Unexplained cases, especially when a viral cause is arbitrarily brought on board, need to be examined very closely, but they rarely are. When Rappoport was writing his first book, AIDS Incorporated, which I've shared with you here, in 1988, he looked into a very early set of AIDS cases in Los Angeles. They were all described as young, previously healthy, and then suddenly struck down by a new virus. The CDC published parts of their medical records. From the records, it was clear previously healthy was a gross lie. So, when you hear a young person died from the virus, don't make the assumption that that was some young, vibrantly healthy person. Now, you probably get that story in the media, but there's no need to make the assumption. From the records, it was clear previous healthy was a gross lie. These young men had prior medical conditions for which they were undoubtedly treated with toxic medications that are now off the market because they were toxic. There was an indication of toxic street drug use. After an hour of reading their partial records, the diagnosis of suddenly struck down by a new virus was quickly dissolving. So the case that Rappoport makes in his book, AIDS Incorporated, which is thick book, thick with research, sources. He talked to the people who were inside the industry. And the case he makes in the book is that the thing that they called HIV, the thing that people tested positive for, and the thing called AIDS that people were dying from, the syndrome, were not related. In fact, this thing people were dying from that was called AIDS, people were dying with the same ailments people always die from. It just had a new label. John Rappoport has been investigating so-called epidemics for over 30 years. He's developed a strategy of looking for multiple causes of death that have nothing to do with the announced virus of the moment. Rappoport says he's always found those causes. Always found those causes. The virus is one of the greatest frauds in modern history. Say that. Say that at the bank next week. Say that at the convenience store tomorrow. Say that at the dinner table with your family some night. The virus is one of the greatest frauds in modern history. You'll get strange looks. But we got to ask these questions. Now, Rappoport's investigation of the cult of COVID. Now, just as he said here, after he prepared several articles recently, the article we just read, where he stated that the virus was never properly discovered. And so then he got the question, so are countries all over the world pretending that the virus is real? And the answer is this. No, they're not pretending. Countries aren't doing anything. Government leaders are issuing edicts on the scientific and medical advice of officials surrounding them. So see, now there we have the basic problem or the answer as to why this is so easy, why this has happened to us, and it has happened so quickly with so little resistance from us because of this mindset. The mindset being here of someone asking this question. So if then are all these countries just pretending? No, they're not pretending. They don't have to pretend. Remember, we live among true believers, people who are true believers in things like humanism, the ultimate idolatry, which is humanism. People who have bought into scientism. We're listening to what the scientists say. No, you're not. No, you're not. You're listening to what the person on television told you to do. That's not actually listening to the scientists. So, no, they're not pretending. Countries aren't doing anything. Government leaders are issuing edicts on the scientific and medical advice of officials surrounding them. So, once again, scientific and medical advice of officials who are not the government leaders. Scientific and medical advice, these officials, scientific and medical officials, are the ones calling the shots right now. We live in a technocracy right now. These officials are also true believers. It's quite possible that Tony Fauci doesn't. He's a true believer. Possible. I don't know about him. I think he could be full of it. But anyway, they have faith that the COVID virus exists. Why do they have this faith? They've been told it exists by their bosses. And so it goes all the way up the line in the cult. Bigger and bigger bosses. All of them true believers. yes, a lab here and a lab there, claim they have isolated the new COVID virus, but they have not done a complete study to prove the existence of any new virus. Meanwhile, everyone assumes it to be true. A complete and coherent study would involve, say, 1,000 epidemic patients side by side. Researchers would make an electron microscope photos of tissue samples taken from all the patients. The photos would be made after these samples have been subjected to proper purification processes involving a centrifuge and the correct collection of viral material from the centrifuge. Okay, blah, blah, blah. In other words, what he's saying here, this study has not been done and it won't be done. Why? Because there is a great risk from reading the results of 1,000 side-by-side electron microscope photos. If the photos don't match up, if they don't all show particles of the same virus, and if those particles aren't unique, for example, never before seen, then two things happen. The claim that one virus is causing a pandemic collapses, and the claim of discovering a new virus collapses. That's why the correct study has not been done. Little anecdotal claims from this lab and that lab don't amount to a hill of beans. They are irrelevant. So what's left? Kernel of nothing. The virus exists, passed from hand to hand, shared by all, signifying belief, right? Reflex belief. It takes a belief system. It takes a very specific belief system to accept all of this and then to allow yourself to live in fear from it. That requires a very specific belief system. And Christians are subject to it as well. Everyone is. But if we just apply our ability to reason through these issues, we can see very clearly that we're okay. We're okay. Everything is fine. It says here, everything that follows stemming from a false belief in a new virus is meaningless. It all goes back to the beginning. That's where the fabrication was hatched. Before you say, but what about this? How do you explain that? Yeah, you really do have to go through John Rappoport's articles and read his accounts and his sources. This Vox article that I just read you, where they attempt to explain why the death toll is down and the cases are up, and about how, the deaths are going to catch up, and boy, when they do, it's going to be, they have no sources. They offer no sources for that opinion. But John Rappoport, in his work, always gives you clear sources to where you can go and check the information for yourself if you want to. And I insist that you do check the sources of people who are making claims like this. That's how we get into trouble, when we stop checking behind people to see whether or not they're actually legitimate. A large cult is composed of many layers of foot soldiers, all of whom believe. But when you get to the top, you see a few people who do know the truth. They lie about the discovery of a new virus, then they spread that lie to further their own agenda. In this case, destruction of nations and the ushering in of a fascist technocracy. Wow, look at that. A fascist technocracy for the planet. In other words, a brave new world. But as I say, Rappoport says, the main body of the cult, the millions of mask wearers and the distancing people and the doctors and the mayors and the governors and the routine public health officials and so on, they're operating on faith. They have a very specific belief system. Their God is Fauci and television and news. Bingo. John Rappoport has a way of putting these things into words that I really appreciate. The scientists who are in the cult believe in their own special procedure of discovering a new virus. They sequence its genetic structure. This is their scripture. This is their Bible. But the problem is, what kind of sample are they starting with? They say it is a new virus, but this too is faith right? How can they claim that it's a new virus? All they can claim is we've never seen it before. You can't claim it's brand new, that it was never on the planet before, can you? You can't make that claim. All you can claim is that you've never seen it. It could be a part of an irrelevant virus. It could be a whole but decaying irrelevant virus. It could be a random piece of genetic material or cellular debris or exosomes, whatever. And if this sample is used as the basis of analysis at many labs, they will all come up with the same irrelevant result, to which they will bow down and worship it. A geneticist tried to sell Rappoport the results of a single small study in which a purported COVID-19 virus was injected into mice and caused them to get sick. This, to him, was proof that indeed a new dangerous virus had been discovered. Rappoport says, I was dumbfounded, but not too dumbfounded to reply. First of all, the mice had been genetically altered. Why? Usually that means their immune systems were disabled, in which case any old germ could make them ill. That happens to lab rats. They have their immune systems disabled so that certain studies can be done on the illnesses that they want the mice to carry. In any case, any old germ could make them ill. Once again, there you go. A leap of assumption by a scientist who ought to know better. Second, the whole purpose of doing animal studies, as misguided as that practice is to move up the chain of species until you get to animals that most closely resemble humans, which are apes. Definitely not mice. And third, even if a virus can only make ordinary unaltered mice ill, so what? What does that tell us? What does that tell us? You can inject a mouse with something, and the mouse gets sick. What does that mean for me? Not much. And third, even if a virus can make... so what? They still haven't proved that virus is new. They still... even if all that's true, they still haven't proved that the virus is new. And that is the claim of COVID. Will their claims stand up to scrutiny? They don't. They don't. And I am certainly no expert. Anyone can follow this trail of breadcrumbs to the truth. They still haven't proved that the virus is new. But they try. They keep trying and failing to prove that a new coronavirus exists, which is causing a global pandemic. Cults don't care. They will announce any claim and back it up with any useless piece of evidence. They'll go to war on the basis of a claim. In this instance, it turns out to be an economic war against the people of Earth. That is Agenda 21. That's the agenda for the 21st century right there. War against people. A psychological war. Ultimately, a war against freedom. And that is exactly what we see playing out around us right now. All right, so let me jump over here to the chat and see how you guys are doing today. I'm glad you folks have joined me today. 40-some watching live today. That's a pretty good number. Thanks, my friends, for joining me today. Welcome to Armor of Truth Radio. Number, whatever this number is, number 39. Take my breath away as we discuss just asking good questions, not being dupes. I think the point is I also want to make is that we're dealing with people who are living, they have a very specific worldview. But the worldview is not based, it's not based in truth. What is the three aspects of a good worldview? I've shared this here before. The very first quality, your worldview. A worldview is how you perceive the world around you, how you perceive it, how you choose to navigate through it, what you believe and don't believe. The first aspect of a good worldview is that it must be true. To hold to an idea that is false will not serve you. The second quality of a good worldview is that it successfully answers the most important questions humans ask, which are these. What is the prime reality? Or what is the first cause? How did we get here? Secondly, what is the nature of external reality of the world around us? Thirdly, what is a human being? What happens to a person at death? Why is it possible for us to know anything at all? How do we know what is right and wrong? What is the meaning of human history? Also, what is my purpose for being here? And what is the nature of my relationship with this first cause that we call God? Those questions, if you can answer all those questions, then you have a good worldview. If you can answer them truly. And that's what the Christian worldview does. The third quality of a good worldview is that those people who ascribe to it, those people who live by it, become better people for having that worldview. So we're dealing with people who have a very specific worldview, who are pushing all this onto the public. Their worldview is not founded in truth. And they don't become better people for having their worldview. Clearly, they become abhorrent. All right, let's see what people are saying out here in the chat. I'll just start right there. Is Bridget Williams. Welcome to the stream, my friend. She says, my aunt suffers from asthma. She tested positive for COVID-19, but my uncle, whom she spent every day with, tested negative. I call BS. Even she calls BS. Very good point. I just ran into, I was riding around doing errands with my mother. Doing errands with my mother the other day. She needed someone to ride with her. I rode with her. And so we had to go into a few places because, people of a certain generation, they don't pay their bills online. They walk in and pay their bill in person. So that's how my mom does it. So I was riding around with her doing that and spoke to a guy in one of these places. Just a random person came standing in line, out in front of the place, standing 6 feet apart, like good little soldiers. And just a random guy. Saying all the same things. I'm running into more and more people who just feel like just exactly what Bridget said there. Good people. Good, everyday people out there who are willing to trust and be patriotic if there's good reason to do that. But everyone, not everyone, many people, just like Bridget explains here, are starting to ask these questions. And they're not getting answers from the mainstream. They're probably not even getting answers from their own doctors. Remember, most of the people that we call our doctors are true believers of this system that has proven itself to be capable of lying through its teeth to us, to exact us, to lock us up in our homes. Dento Bean, this is a new name. It's good to see you out there. Dento Bean, that's a cool name. Says, deception upon deception upon deception, and confusion is spreading like a virus. Right there is a good point. That is really the virus that's spreading. It is confusion. At first, the virus was fear. Fear is what was spreading at first. There was just a lot of fear. And it has turned into more of confusion. Valor Mogola says, strong delusion. That's a good point. Yeah, Dento Bean says once again, endure, endure, endure until the end, brothers and sisters. Valor Magola says Fauci is a Freemason. Yeah, I think so. Bridget Williams says their main tool in brainwashing is repetition. Yeah, they used to call that in some of the MK Ultra studies. They would call repetition. They would call that psychic driving, where they would play a tape to a subject who was sedated, and they would play a tape over and over in the mind, like with either some certain statements on it. You would assume it would be statements of affirmation, like you're strong, you're healthy, you're happy, blah blah. But no, of course not. That's MK Ultra. They wanted to create. The purpose of the study was to research how to create a super soldier, someone that you could program to go in and assassinate someone and come back without having any memory of doing it. So I think we're all subjects in a huge worldwide MK Ultra experiment at this point. Good conversations out in the chat today. There's Miss Ostrich. Good to see you out there. She has new homeschoolers may like to read John Taylor Gatto for motivational. I found it so definitely. I've got a couple of John Taylor Gatto's books. I've got this one here. I used that one in the last stream I did with Days of Noah. This is a collection of speeches and essays that John Taylor Gatto wrote, and it's good stuff. If you want to understand what the problem is with our compulsory education system, our public compulsory education system, that book is a great place to start. Dumbing Us Down by John Taylor Gatto. Ms. Ostrich says, I don't want to be tested. I have no desire to be tested either. I can relate to that. What am I being tested for? I mean, if I don't trust the test, why would I get tested? If, there's 110 different tests, they don't have a test. Dento's asked an interesting question out there that I want to address for a second. Dento Bean asked the question: do you guys think the Dana Cornerstone dreams are prophecy? The way I look at that is, is the prophecy causing people to see their sin, and does it convict people to come to Jesus Christ? If the prophecy doesn't have that at its core, if it isn't truly about that, then always be skeptical of any prophecy, first of all. But secondly, that's a good way to go about it too. Is it convicting people's hearts and causing people to come to Jesus? Because all the prophets in the Old Testament, that's what their purpose was to show people their sin. Anyway, off on a tangent there. John McRae, 2006. These COVID tests are inaccurate as can be. They have been shown to be completely useless. That is true. But every day on the news, no problem with the news. They will continue to report these statistics to us as if they mean something, because it plays into the fear. Dento Bean, a question here. Should churches forfeit their tax exemption to be able to speak freely? Yeah, I think, I don't know. I'm not one to give advice to how people should run their churches. But I'm going to, in my personal opinion, I would say, yeah, it makes sense, doesn't it? I mean, are we running a business, or are we worshiping the Lord? So we really have to be careful about that, because the church does need to support itself. And with that tax-exempt status, that makes that a lot easier. In some cases, the churches can't support themselves if they don't have that. But that is a good question. Should we change the way with all of the big changes that are going on now, right? Should perhaps we think about whether or not we should do business with the federal government? By do business, I mean incorporate with the federal government, or get that 501c3 tax status. I think, in my opinion, the easiest thing to do now is to just, from the very start, get used to paying the taxes so that you don't have to be beholden to someone else. But first of all, make sure that they have a claim to your money before you pay them taxes. Anyway, for myself, the way I intend to do it once this ministry has grown to a level where it's necessary is I will have two forms. For people who want to donate large sums and they want to make sure they can write this stuff off on their taxes at the end of the year, I will provide that method. I will provide a 501c3 conduit for donations for people who want to do that. But I'll always have the primary part of this set up as just a regular, business, because right now that's what seems to be the safest way to do it, because the 501c3 exemption makes you in some ways beholden to the federal government. Like for instance, they can come in and shut you down. But if you don't have that distinction, these are legal questions. I'm getting out of my depth here. But anyway, that's how I see it. Exempting is a double-edged sword. Yes. 501c3 exempting is a double-edged sword. Yeah, it is. I'd say it's probably best determined from person to person on an individual basis, individual ministry basis. Bridget Williams says, I lost my job as a kindergarten teacher for letting my kids pray and read Bible stories in class. Well, remember what Jesus said. Anyone who suffers for my sake here, that is a great blessing to suffer for Jesus' sake here. Also, he also said, anyone who loses their life for my sake will find it. Nick Bold says, thank God for his grace. And by faith, family, we shall overcome. Certainly we will. Oh, let's see here. Oh, Chadasana Moves. Just enjoying the last video about doubt. Cool. Thank you for that. I appreciate that. That was a strange video to do. And I saw another one here, Rosie Clower, who also made a super chat. So she said, I think she was asking, yeah, here it is. Would you ever consider teaching a lesson on the 7 seals? Yeah, I definitely would. I've got Bible studies on the book of Daniel and the book of Revelation, and I've gotten through the first 3 chapters of Revelation, and I stopped right there. Because what I found out was everything, and without a really extensive research into this, everything that I might do in a Bible study from that point on is going to be conjecture. It's going to be hard because everyone has a different interpretation of every symbol that comes up in that book. I think there is a right interpretation of it. But anyway, about the 7 seals, what I can do and what I will do, the way I've handled these things in the past, is I'll give you, like I normally do, I'll give you the mainstream opinion on these things, and then a couple other opinions on what they mean and what they or what they might not mean, and then you can take that information and decide for yourself, use it, pray about it, and then come to your own conclusion about it. Whenever I run into an issue where there are opposing doctrines inside the body of Christ itself, I tend to not take one side or the other. I'll just present you both and say, there you go. There's what these two sides think. We're all Christians. Here's what the two sides think. Now you can decide which one you will. Or you can be like me. You can stay on in the middle of it. Let's see here. CK Javari, $10 super chat. Thank you for the great work. This is really Least I can do. Thank you for telling the truth about. Oh, here it is. CK Jarv 01. Keep up the great work, Brad. This is really the least I can do. Thank you for telling the truth about every issue to the best of your ability. Keep fighting the good fight of faith, brother. Brad, don't stop. Your brother in Christ. Clayton Jarvis. All right, cool. Thanks for that. I appreciate that. That's a nice encouragement. I appreciate that. I need that sometimes too. I'm a fragile creature, my friends. I don't mind saying it. I'm a fragile creature. So thanks to CK Clayton Jarvis. Thanks to Rosie Clower for that today. I appreciate you guys helping me out. Yeah, so to Rosie Clower, I definitely will get around to the Seven Seals for sure. But like I said, I'll do it that way. I'll provide you. Here's what this group of Christians thinks, and this group thinks, and this is maybe why they. I generally take a very traditional Protestant approach to eschatology. The church that I was involved with most of my life has been a Baptist church. I've been to lots of other ones in recent years, though, just based on what I'm doing. But anyway, yeah, we'll get around to doing that for sure. Bible studies and getting deep into the Word of God is what we really love to do here, but I don't go deeper than I am able to go. In other words, I'm less of a teacher. I am more just like you. We study together. Bridget says, found you on Days of Noah. Love the work you both do. To donate. How do I go about doing that? Oh, to donate. Oh, okay, Bridget. There are links in the description to donate. There's a PayPal link for a direct one-time donation. There's the way that you see the people donating live on the stream. There's a link in there for a Streamlabs type of where you can make a donation and get your comment up on the screen. Or you can join Patreon. The easiest and most preferred way is just PayPal. And those links are all in the description. And I appreciate you asking that question, and I appreciate everyone's support. I see Free the Captives is with us. All right, my friends, that wraps it up for today. I do appreciate you all coming in and joining us today. Or joining me. There's just me. It's just me here. Let's see here. Let's do this one. There we go. Thank you for those compliments, my friends. I appreciate that. I appreciate your prayers. Your support and prayers is the most important thing. Thank you for the super chats, for the donations. Thank you very much for that, my friends. It's really important. So I hope this has been useful, edifying in some way for you. And meet me right back here on Thursday at 4 o'clock for part 11 in the 25-part series, What is Biblical Christianity? Where this week we're going to be talking about, we've been going over what are Jesus' roles? What were his 3 roles when he was, while he was here with us in the flesh? Next we'll be talking about Christ's humiliation and exaltation next week, or Thursday. And after that, we're going to get into salvation. So that is where it's going to get very, very interesting. People disagree on salvation for some reason. All right, my friends, God bless you. And thank you for joining me. We'll see you right here again on at least on Thursday at 4 o'clock, maybe before. So, God bless you, my friends. We'll see you next time.